Hello and welcome to my rambling. Also, spoilers ahead, you have been warned. So, a while ago, part 2 of the Fate Unlimited Bladeworks and HSR collaboration was announced, so I think this is a good time to talk about our favorite hedonistic ancient king, Gilgamesh, because I feel like it. Why did I choose Gilgamesh? Well, because he will be one of the new characters featured in part 2 and because he is quite an important character in the Fate lore. Another reason is that even though the collaboration is supposed to be with Unlimited Bladeworks, it is obvious that this guy will be sanitized to fit the standards of the current gacha demographic and modern media consumption in general. Adapting a more accurate Gilgamesh will probably result in a lot of angry mods on Twitter's gacha community. Before we start the video, a few disclaimers. I do not play HSR, nor do I follow its story. I played Honkai Impact 3rd and Honkai Gakuen back in the day, as well a little bit of Genshin when it comes to Hoyoverse IPs, so if you are an HSR fan stumbling upon this video, I am sorry to disappoint you. I am what people in the Type Moon community might call a Type Boomer, a person who has been following this fictional universe for a long time and is familiar with its other works outside of Fate. This video is not an attack on HSR or Hoyoverse. It is an educational video for both me and you, because I want to go back to my roots as an Nasuverse enjoyer. Now with that out of the way, let's start the video. First, we need a little bit of context. In a future video, I will dive deeper into the subject, but for now I will try my best to keep things brief. This collaboration, just like part 1, is supposed to be based on the second route of the Fate Stay Night visual novel. But what is Fate Stay Night and what is a visual novel? Well, a visual novel is a digital book with music and sometimes voice acting in which you experience a story that in some cases can have different outcomes, called routes, based on your decision at important points in the narrative. They are mainly produced in Japan and were a big part of weeb culture back in the 90s, 2000s and 2010s. Nowadays they are more of a niche genre, with anime gacha games acting in a way as their spiritual successors. The Fate Stay Night visual novel was the first piece of Fate media produced by Type Moon and is part of the much larger Nasuverse. And now you're asking, what is the Nasuverse? Well, my dear cupcakes, the Nasuverse is a fictional universe created by the co-founders of Type Moon, Kinoko Nasu as the writer and Takashi Takeuchi as the illustrator. The Nasuverse is a collection of works centered around 4 main IPs: Tsukihime, Kara no Kyokai, Fate Stay Night, from which the Fate franchise would evolve, and Witch of the Holy Night. Nasu's works had a huge impact on anime culture and anime gacha games, which might be a topic for another video. Fate Stay Night is an eroge visual novel, meaning a visual novel that contains erotic scenes, released on January 30, 2004. It is split into 3 routes following the GOAT, Shiro Emiya, as the protagonist. The 3 routes are Fate, Unlimited Bladeworks, and Heaven's Feel. The main difference between these routes come from the primary antagonists and heroines featured in each of them. The Fate route follows Saber as the main heroine, Unlimited Bladeworks follows Rin Tosaka, and Heaven's Feel follows Rin's younger sister, Sakura Mato. In terms of antagonists, the Fate route ones are Kirei Kotomine and Gilgamesh. Fate Unlimited Bladeworks has Gilgamesh and Archer as its main antagonists, while in Heaven's Feel, the role is taken by Kirei again, Zoken Mato and Sakura Mato, with one overarching antagonist above all of them that we will talk more about it later. Wait, I mentioned that Sakura is one of the main heroines, and now, apparently I'm mentioning that she was an antagonist. Well, it's complicated. For now, to keep things simple, I will only mention that yes, Sakura was both a heroine in her route and an antagonist. And I am not going to open that can of worms any further in this video. Oh, and we also have the most pathetic human being ever written into fiction, Shinji Mato. Just mentioning his name makes me want to watch a montage of all the moments in which he suffers. So now, with that out of the way, you might ask yourself, how will the collab sanitize Gilgamesh compared to his Fate visual novel counterparts? Will Hoyoverse turn Gilgamesh into more of a hero or anti-hero compared to an antagonist? Nope, my sweet summer child. By sanitized, I mean that Gilgamesh was a monster who deserved a place on a predator's watchlist. The main trait of Gilgamesh is his ego. He is called the King of Heroes in the franchise, being the first recorded hero in human history in the Sumerian poem The Epic of Gilgamesh. To clarify, hero in this case means something closer to a main character. The character the story is focused on, not the more familiar sense of a person who saves lives and does good deeds. Gilgamesh is a heroic spirit. Heroic spirits are real-life historical or mythological figures who were recorded in the Throne of Heroes. Gilgamesh, well, is inspired by the real-world king Gilgamesh, a demigod who ruled the Mesopotamian city of Uruk during the 3rd millennium BC. He was the son of King Lugalbanda and the goddess Ninsun. His early reign was notorious for his tyranny. He was an oppressor, forcibly conscripted his young male subjects into wars and claimed the right to sleep with people's wives on their wedding night. His reign was so bad that his subjects prayed to the Sumerian gods to punish him. The gods created the wild man Enkidu in order to put him back in line. They fought, and even though they were evenly matched, Gilgamesh won in the end, and the two became friends. After a while, Gilgamesh caught the attention of the goddess Inanna, better known as Ishtar, and she tried to seduce him. Unfortunately for Ishtar, she was rejected, because Gilgamesh was aware of the unfortunate fates that had befallen Ishtar's previous lovers. Enraged, Ishtar sent the Bull of Heaven to destroy Gilgamesh and Uruk. Gilgamesh and Enkidu killed the Bull of Heaven, and in contempt towards Ishtar, Enkidu threw one of the bull's legs at her. For this affront against a deity, the gods killed Enkidu. In his grief, Gilgamesh abandoned his vanity and pride and went on a quest to find the meaning of life and defeat death. He sought out Utnapishtim, a man who had been granted immortality after surviving the Great Flood. During his travels, he met a tavern keeper named Siduri, who tried to convince him to abandon his quest for immortality and instead enjoy the life of a mortal. He rejected the idea and was directed by Siduri to Urshanabi, who helped him find Utnapishtim. In order to obtain immortality, Utnapishtim gave him two options. The first was to prove himself worthy by staying awake for 6 days and 6 nights, which Gilgamesh failed to do so. The second option was a magical herb that could grant him immortality. However, in an act of carelessness while bathing, a snake came and ate the herb. After losing the chance to become immortal, he accepted his mortality and returned to Uruk, where he ruled as a wise king abandoning his tyrannical behavior and eventually writing down his story on the walls of the city. In the Nasuverse, things are more complicated. You see, the world of the Nasuverse is divided into two primary ages, the Age of Gods and the Age of Humanity. In 12,000 BC, the gods still walked the earth as physical manifestations of nature and were worshipped by humanity. They remained powerful until Sephar descended, killing multiple gods and destroying parts of the earth. As a result, the power of the gods over humanity began to fade. Because of this, the gods became unable to manifest on Earth without possessing a host. If left unresolved, this problem would eventually cause them to lose their authority over both Earth and humanity. Their solution was Gilgamesh, a being whose entire existence was crafted for the purpose of securing their dominion over humanity. Thus, around 2600 BC, Gilgamesh was born from King Lugalbanda and the goddess Ninsun. Being 2/3 god and 1/3 human, he was supposed to possess both the perspective of a god and enough humanity to rule as a bridge between the two. The idea was that he would serve as a neutral party capable of intervening when necessary. In his youth, Gilgamesh followed this plan and was a just and beloved king. However, thanks to his clairvoyance, the ability to see into the future, he could see humanity's stagnation under the gods' control. Because of this, he refused to become a puppet of the gods and rebelled against them. He saw potential in humanity, and in his eyes, the gods were preventing mankind from reaching that potential. To help humanity, he became a tyrant, carrying out many of the actions described in the account of his historical counterpart. He believed that by forcing humanity into hardship, he could accelerate their growth and development, allowing them to advance without relying on the gods and thereby laying the foundations for the age of humanity. As the last godlike king and human king, he sought to become the final obstacle humanity will need to overcome before beginning its own age. By earning the hatred of both gods and humans, Gilgamesh would achieve true neutrality, even if it condemned him to a life of isolation. So obviously the gods were not pleased. They wanted to force him back onto the original path, and they sent Enkidu to confront him. The two of them fought and eventually became friends. The story involving Ishtar occurs in much the same way, except that Gilgamesh also rejected her because he feared that she would interfere with his plans, in addition to her previous relationships ending disastrously. After the events with Ishtar and the death of Enkidu, Gilgamesh declared Enkidu as his only friend and started his quest for immortality. His desire for immortality stemmed from Enkidu's death. For the first time, he had lost someone he considered his equal, and he feared that death would prevent him from serving as humanity's arbiter until the end of time. Simply put, after seeing Enkidu die, Gilgamesh became aware of his own mortality and realized that one day death will also claim him. He embarked on his quest of finding immortality, and he was offered the option to beg for forgiveness from the gods by staying awake 6 days and 6 nights to gain immortality. He rejected it, so he was given an herb that could give him eternal life. After decades of journeying, he started to experience happiness again, and was struck by vanity, so he wanted to bathe himself in a nearby spring, only for a hungry snake to eat the herb, shedding its scales. In that moment, Gilgamesh, after realizing that the immortality he wanted was simply just a way to regress his aging, and being bested by a creature lesser than him that was simply hungry, he started to laugh. He laughed at how absurd it was, thus rejecting the idea of immortality entirely, seeing it as a goal that weak people chase in order to gain more time to achieve their actual goals. The Archer version in the visual novel, and the one that will appear in HSR, is a version of Gilgamesh from before his quest to find immortality. There is also a caster version of him, which represents Gilgamesh after his quest for immortality, when he ruled Uruk as a wise and benevolent king. To make things less confusing, the Throne of Heroes can record multiple versions of a hero, which explains why there are two Gilgamesh heroic spirits. Also, even though Archer Gilgamesh is supposed to represent a younger Gilgamesh, he is still aware of his entire myth, but he still has the personality from before the death of Enkidu. The Nasuverse is complicated. Well, that was a lot. Just to clarify, most of that stuff was added later on after the release of Fate Stay Night, as the lore became more complex. In the initial work, most of his complexity was non-existent. Gilgamesh was pretty much a jerk. So what did he do in the visual novel? Well, to explain that we need to explain the final villain of the novel, an overarching presence that appears in all three routes named Angramanium, a figure from the Zoroastrian religion that dominated the region of Iran until the 7th century AD. In the 4th Holy Grail War, that is presented in Fate Zero, Gilgamesh was summoned in the Archer class by Tokiomi Tosaka, the father of Rin Tosaka. He did not like Tokiomi and found his ally Kirei Kotomine, the master of assassin, more interesting due to his conflicted nature. Gilgamesh convinced Kirei that indulging into pleasure is not a bad thing. The issue was that Kirei found pleasure in inflicting pain to other people. Gilgamesh confronted Kirei about his true nature and eventually replaced Tokiomi as his master by convincing Kirei to kill him. In the meantime, Gilgamesh also took an interest in Saber after the Banquet of the Kings. He wanted to break her noble nature by making her his bride by force and doing other things to her that I will not mention in this video because they are really creepy. After the Grail was destroyed in the 4th Grail War, Gilgamesh was corrupted by it due to Angramainyu residing within the Grail. Being submerged in the corrupted mud of the Grail, Gilgamesh, who was already somewhat twisted due to being summoned as an archer class, became even more twisted. During the 5th Holy Grail War, which is the story of Fate Stay Night, the role of Gilgamesh differed from route to route. In the Fate route, his only purpose was to claim Saber as his bride, but he was ultimately defeated by her. In Unlimited Bladeworks, things became more interesting. Instead of pursuing Saber, we get to see the conclusion he arrived at after being corrupted by the Grail. You see, he enjoyed the wonders of the modern world, but he also saw humans becoming more like parasites, obsessed with consumerism, which in his eyes made them weak. His plan was to use the Grail's mud to flood the earth, wiping out humanity. Only those who managed to survive would be worthy enough of becoming his subjects. He also antagonizes Shiro and Archer a lot. Gilgamesh is ultimately defeated by Shiro due to his own arrogance, which caused him to see Shiro as beneath him. In Heaven's Feel, he is swiftly dealt with early on in the story by Sakura, who had gradually become a vessel for Angramanyu. Gilgamesh tried to kill her after recognizing the danger she posed, but once again his arrogance got the better of him. You see, Gilgamesh is arrogant, so arrogant in fact that he often sees no reason to put effort into a fight if he considers an opponent as being inferior to him. This arrogance comes to his detriment due to leaving his guard down during his fights. Also, just to mention, in the Fate route, when trying to force his way onto Saber, he again behaves like a creep and says a lot of questionable stuff that, once again, I will not go into this video. Basically, he is so arrogant that he leaves his guard down a lot during his fights. Regarding the collab, the reason I said that he will be sanitized compared to the version in the visual novel is because he already has been mellowed out over the years. Starting with Fate Extra CCC, Gilgamesh was gradually stripped of most of his creepier behavior. Fate Grand Order also introduced the caster version of him, who is meant to represent a more mature Gilgamesh, while Prisma Ilia introduced his younger self, which despises the archer version of himself. Nowadays, he is one of the most beloved characters in Fate. Fate Zero, which was released after Stay Night, still had to portray some of his more questionable behavior because it served as a prequel, but added a pinch of hedonism into his behavior. So how will the collab handle him most likely? Well, we can have a hint based on his behavior in Fate Extella and Fate Extra CCC. In those two games, Gilgamesh had Hakuno Kishinami as a master. Just like HSR, the Fate Extra series has a protagonist that can be played as either a male or a female. With the male Hakuno, Gilgamesh acts more like a comrade, while with female Hakuno, he behaves in a more romantic manner, becoming a complete tsundere. As for his overall role, from what I understand, even part 1 of the collab deviated from Unlimited Blade Works by adapting certain elements from the Fate route. Now, with Rin's design, it is obvious that they are doing something similar again. Rin possesses Zelrich's blade that she used in Heaven's Feel, and it is pretty obvious that Hoyoverse is not going to use a pure Unlimited Blade Works version of Gilgamesh, because that will make him the antagonist of the collab. There's also a lot more stuff to talk about Gilgamesh, like explaining his noble phantasms and going into his skills and the rest of his abilities, but that will make the video way too long than it already is. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe and comment. I will see you on the next one.